The fog rolling off the bay was the first thing I noticed when the cab pulled onto my mother's street. Not my mother's street anymore, I supposed. Mine. She had left it to me in the will. The only thing she had left me besides a lifetime of being told I was the responsible one, the capable one, the one who did not need help, because I always figured things out. I had not been back to Charleston in 4 months. My firm had sent me to handle an estate fraud case in Portland, the kind of sprawling, complex work that eats your calendar whole. I had video called my mother's house 3 times in the first month. Nobody picked up. I assumed the line was having issues. I sent flowers for the anniversary of my mother's passing. They were never acknowledged. I chalked it up to grief, to distance, to the particular silence that settles over a family after a matriarch disappears. The cab stopped at the curb. I stepped out with my carry-on and looked up at the house. There were children's bicycles on the porch. I stood very still on the sidewalk. My mother did not have grandchildren. I did not have children. The bikes were small, bright pink, with training wheels and plastic streamers on the handlebars. One of them had a name tag tied to the basket. It said, Madison. A woman opened the front door before I could process what I was seeing. She was in her mid-30s, dark hair pulled into a ponytail, wiping her hands on a dish towel. She looked friendly, the way people look before they realize you are standing in front of a house you thought was yours. Can I help you? She asked. That is my house, I said. My voice came out much quieter than I intended. She tilted her head. She had the expression of someone who had been through this before and dreaded it. She stepped back inside for a moment, and came back holding a manila envelope. She held it out to me. I am so sorry, she said quietly. We were told the previous owner had passed, and the estate had been settled. We closed on this property 11 weeks ago. Everything was through a licensed estate attorney. I took the envelope. Inside was a copy of the deed. Dated November 3rd, signed by the executor of the estate. The executor was my sister, Vanessa. The signature at the bottom, the one authorizing the sale, the one that transferred our mother's house for $720,000 to the family now living inside it, was mine. I had not signed it. I had been in Portland on November 3rd. I could prove it down to the minute. I handed the envelope back to the woman. She deserved nothing less than the truth, and she was going to get it. But not right then. Thank you, I said. This is not your fault. You may want to call your title insurance company in the next 48 hours. She stared at me as I turned and walked back to the cab. I asked the driver to take me to a hotel downtown. I sat in the back seat with my bag on my lap and my hands folded in my lap, and I looked out the window at the gray Charleston sky, and I did not cry. I thought I would. I waited for it. It did not come. What came instead was something colder and much more useful. My mother had died 9 months ago. Ovarian cancer, fast and brutal. I had taken a leave of absence for the last 6 weeks of her life. I slept on the pull-out sofa in her living room. I drove her to appointments. I organized her medications in a weekly pill organizer with her name written on it in permanent marker. I held her hand during the harder nights. My sister Vanessa had visited twice, both times for less than 48 hours. Both times she brought her husband, Marcus, and her 2 daughters, who ran through the house like it was a vacation rental. Both times she left before anything got difficult. When the will was read, Vanessa sat across the table from me with her arms crossed and her jaw set. The house went to me alone. The savings account, modest as it was, went to me alone. The jewelry, with the exception of Vanessa's childhood locket, went to me alone. My mother had been clear and deliberate in her attorney's office. She had written a letter to accompany the will. It explained, gently, that Nicole had been present, that Nicole had sacrificed, that this was not punishment for Vanessa. It was recognition of a debt that could never be fully repaid. Vanessa said nothing in the attorney's office. She picked up her purse and she left. 2 days later she called me. Her voice was the voice she uses when she is performing calm, the one that sits just slightly too high in her chest. Mom always loved you more, she said. You know that. That is not what happened, I said. You manipulated a dying woman, Nicole, and I am not going to pretend I do not see that. She hung up. I did not call back. I should have known then that she was already planning. I should have understood that Vanessa does not process loss. She redirects it into acquisition. The hotel room was small and clean and smelled like industrial lavender. I set my bag by the bed. I did not unpack. I sat in the chair by the window with my laptop open and the gray bay visible through the glass, and I started with what I knew. My name is Nicole Reeves, and I am 31 years old. I work for a federal task force that investigates financial crimes against estates. Specifically, I find the people who steal from the dead. I track forged documents, fraudulent probate filings, executor misconduct, and the elaborate paper trails that predatory family members build when they decide that grief is an opportunity. I have recovered assets in cases ranging from $40,000 to $14 million. I have put 12 people in federal prison in the last 4 years. I know every pressure point in an estate transaction. I know exactly where the forgeries hide, and exactly how to find them. My sister had just handed me the most open and shut case I had ever seen. She had forged a power of attorney, used it to authorize a sale, and pocketed $720,000 from the estate of a woman who had been dead for 6 months, a woman whose will had already been entered into probate, a woman whose estate I had been legally named administrator of. She had done all of this while I was 4 states away. She had done all of this while I was working. She had done all of this and apparently celebrated, because when I opened the county recorder's database and pulled the transaction records, the sale had closed on November 3rd, and on November 7th, there was a wire transfer of $31,000 to a jeweler on King Street, another $18,500 to a dealership in Mount Pleasant, a third transfer, $24,000, to a travel agent. She was not even trying to hide it. I opened a second browser tab and pulled up the probate court records. The petition to close the estate early had been filed by Vanessa using a power of attorney document that bore my signature, notarized by a man named Gerald Pitts at a UPS store on James Island. I made a note of Gerald Pitts. A notary who witnesses a signature he did not witness is not a notary. He is a co-conspirator. I pulled my work credentials and ran Vanessa through the federal asset database. She had debts. A lot of them. 2 maxed credit cards. A second mortgage on her house in Somerville. 3 missed payments on Marcus's truck. They had been drowning for 18 months, and nobody had told me. Or rather, I had been told, in the way that families tell you things, with guilt and sighs and pointed silences, but I had not understood the depth of it until I saw it mapped out in the numbers. In the psychology of financial fraud, there is a specific profile for this kind of theft. It is not the desperate crime of someone who has run out of options. It is the crime of someone who has decided that their need supersedes your right. Vanessa had not stolen from a stranger. She had stolen from a sister and dressed the theft in the language of fairness. In her mind, I had been given too much. The house, the recognition, the years of being the good daughter, the one mom trusted. Vanessa had simply corrected the imbalance. She had taken what she had decided she was owed. The logic was seamless inside her own skull. The fact that it was a federal crime was a detail she had chosen not to examine too closely. I compiled everything into a folder and labeled it cleanly. Then I picked up my phone. I called my father first. My parents had divorced when I was 17. My father, Robert, lived in a condo in Colombia and played golf and called on birthdays and holidays. He was not a villain. He was simply absent in the specific way that men of his generation learned to be absent, politely and at a distance. He answered on the 3rd ring. "Nicole," he said. "You back in town?" "I am," I said. "Did you know?" There was a pause. "Long enough. Your sister was in a difficult position," he said finally. "You have to understand. She has children. She has a mortgage. You have your career. You are fine." "Did you know?" I repeated. Another pause. "She mentioned she was handling some paperwork with the estate." I did not ask questions. "I thought you two had worked it out." "We had not worked it out," I said. "She forged my signature and sold Mom's house. I did not know it existed until an hour ago, when I showed up and met the family living inside it." Silence. "I think you need to talk to Vanessa," he said quietly. "I will," I said. "But I wanted you to know that I know, and I wanted you to understand that knowing makes you part of this if you knew." He hung up. I did not feel anything about that. I had expected it. I called Vanessa. She picked up on the 1st ring, which told me she had been waiting. Her voice was arranged carefully, the way you arrange a room before a guest arrives. "Nicole," she said warmly. "You're back. How is Portland?" "I am in Charleston," I said. "I am sitting in a hotel downtown because there is a family living in Mom's house." The warmth left her voice immediately, replaced by something harder, something she had prepared. "Yes," she said. "I handled the estate. It needed to be finalized. You were unavailable." "I was working." "Vanessa, you are always working." She made the words sound like a disease. "You have been working for 4 years while Marcus and I have been struggling. Do you know what it is like to watch your sister travel to Portland and Seattle, and D.C., while your kids are wearing shoes from last year? Mom always said family first. You chose your career. Someone had to make a practical decision. You used my name," I said. "You signed my signature on a legal document." "I am the executor," she said sharply. "I had authority to act." "You are not the executor," I said. "I am. You filed a forged power of attorney to steal executor authority you were never granted. There is a difference, and you know it." Her voice changed again, this time into something brittle, something I recognized from childhood. It was the voice she used when she was about to cry, and was angry about needing to. "I did what I had to do," she said. "You were not here. You are never here. You act like you are the only one who sacrificed for this family, but you have no idea what it is like to need something and know your sister has it and will not share. Mom gave you everything. She gave you the house. She gave you the account. She left me a locket, Nicole. A locket. Like I was some kind of afterthought. Do you have any idea how that felt?" "I do, actually," I said. "I imagine it felt something like coming home to find your mother's house sold." She said nothing. "Where is the money, Vanessa?" I invested it, she said. Marcus and I have a plan. We are paying off the debt and then we are building something real. We bought into a restaurant concept. It is going to be incredible. In 2 years we will pay you back with interest. You just needed to give us a chance. You never give us a chance, Nicole. You just judge, and you work, and you judge. A restaurant concept. She had taken our mother's house, the house where we had grown up, the house with the magnolia tree in the backyard that Mom had planted the year I was born. And she had bought into a restaurant concept. I understand, I said. Thank you for explaining it to me. Something in my voice made her pause. So you are okay? She asked, cautious now. I will talk to you soon, I said. I ended the call. I sat with the phone in my lap for a moment. I thought about my mother's kitchen. The yellow walls she had repainted every 5 years without fail. The drawer that stuck unless you lifted it slightly as you pulled. The way the house smelled in the morning when she was making coffee. That particular combination of chicory and something sweet she always had baking. I thought about the fact that Vanessa had sold all of that for $720,000 and used some of it to buy into a restaurant. I closed my eyes for 2 seconds. Then I opened them and got to work. The first call was to my supervisor at the task force. He had heard everything, and he asked exactly one question. Do you want to recuse? No, I said. I want to work. He was quiet. Then, send me what you have by morning. I'll have a warrant by noon. The second call was to the estate attorney who had handled my mother's will. He had not authorized the power of attorney. He had not known about the petition to close the estate. When I told him what had been filed under his name, the silence on his end had the particular quality of a man understanding that he was about to have a very complicated week. The third call was to Gerald Pitts, the notary. I did not identify myself as law enforcement. I called as a private citizen with a question about a document notarized at his location. He confirmed, helpfully, that yes, he had processed a power of attorney document on October 29th, that the woman who came in was named Nicole Reeves, that she had presented a valid ID. He described the woman. She was taller than me. She had darker hair. She had presented an ID, which meant Vanessa had used a fraudulent ID bearing my name, which added identity theft to the list. That call, I did record. By 9 o'clock that night I had a complete package. The forged power of attorney, the fraudulent estate petition, the timeline that placed me in Portland on the date of notarization, the asset transfers, Gerald Pitts' recorded confirmation that the woman who came in did not match my description, and a full forensic trace of the $720,000 showing exactly where it had gone. I emailed it to my supervisor. I printed a copy at the Hotel Business Center, bound it, and set it on the desk next to my untouched dinner. My supervisor texted at 11:47 p.m. Warrant signed. Local field office will execute tomorrow. They'd like you present. I texted back. Tell me where. I wore my work badge the next morning for the first time on home soil. It felt strange. I had always kept my professional life and my family life in separate compartments. The way you keep bleach away from ammonia because combining them produces something toxic. Standing in front of Vanessa's house in Somerville with 2 federal agents and a warrant, I felt the compartments dissolve. The door opened before we knocked. Vanessa must have seen the car in the driveway. She was still in her robe. Her hair was loose. She looked at me first, then at the badge, then at the agents. Her face moved through 5 expressions in about 3 seconds and settled on something that looked, unexpectedly, like relief. As if the waiting had been worse than the arrival, Marcus appeared behind her. He was holding a mug of coffee. He looked at me, then at the warrant. He set the mug very carefully on the entryway table. Vanessa, one of the agents said, we have a warrant for the arrest of Vanessa and Marcus Cole for estate fraud, wire fraud, forgery, and identity theft. We also have a warrant to seize assets purchased with proceeds from the fraudulent sale. The 2 daughters appeared at the top of the stairs. They were small, still in pajamas. They looked down at us with the wide-open faces of children who do not yet know what is happening but understand from the adults' voices that it is serious. I looked at those 2 little girls. I thought about what I was about to do to their morning, their week, their understanding of who their parents were. I thought about my mother's magnolia tree in a backyard that now belonged to someone else. I thought about the locket Vanessa had called an afterthought, the locket our mother had worn every day for 30 years. I thought about a kitchen with yellow walls and a sticky drawer and the smell of coffee in the morning. I am sorry, I said. Not to Vanessa, to the girls. Vanessa turned to me then. There was something in her expression that was not quite anger and not quite grief. It was something older and raw. You were always her favorite, she said quietly. You know that. I was there, I said. That was the difference. The agents moved past her into the house. Vanessa did not resist. Marcus made a sound like he was going to argue, and then seemed to decide against it. Somewhere in the house I could hear one of the little girls start to cry. The restaurant concept assets were seized. The jewelry Marcus had bought was catalogued. The vacation they had booked was cancelled. The equity that had not yet been spent was frozen in their accounts pending forfeiture proceedings. Gerald Pitts was charged separately. He lost his notary commission and faced a year in county. The estate attorney filed his own complaint, which accelerated the probate correction. The family in my mother's house, the woman with the ponytail and the daughter named Madison, were protected by their title insurance. The insurer covered the fraudulent sale and began civil recovery proceedings against Vanessa and Marcus directly. The family did not have to move. They did not have to pay a second time. They just had to live with the knowledge that the house they moved into had a complicated history, which all houses eventually do. My father called me 3 days after the arrest. He did not apologize. He did not explain. He said, "I hope you know what you did to this family." I said, "I know exactly what I did." He said, "She has children, Nicole." I said, "She made choices, Robert." He did not call again. The probate court awarded me damages from the estate fraud proceedings. The amount, combined with the civil recovery, covered most of what had been taken. Not all of it. The restaurant concept was already partially spent. The money sunk into a lease deposit and equipment that would take time to liquidate. There was a gap. There will always be a gap. No court can give you back the exact dollars, and no dollar amount accounts for what else was taken. I went back to the house once. The woman, her name was Claire, let me in through the back gate. I stood in the backyard for a few minutes. The magnolia tree was still there. It was bare for the season, the branches gray and reaching. It did not look like loss. It looked like a tree waiting for spring, which is what trees do. I thanked Claire. She offered me coffee. I said no. I walked back to my rental car and drove to the airport. I had been approved for a transfer to the Washington field office, a bigger desk, a harder caseload, a city where I did not know every street by its memory. I had rented a 1-bedroom apartment in Capitol Hill, all glass and steel, nothing that would remind me of yellow walls or sticky drawers. I was starting from a clean page, the kind of clean that costs something and is worth every cent of the price. On the flight, I sat by the window and watched the Carolina coast disappear beneath the clouds. I thought about Vanessa in the booking photo I had seen, her face arranged into the familiar performance of someone who believes they are the real victim. I thought about Marcus, who had spent my mother's equity on a truck he could not afford and a dream he had not earned. I thought about my father, who had learned nothing except that silence is sometimes complicity and complicity is sometimes comfortable. And then I stopped thinking about them. Because that is the other thing they take from you. The ones who do this. They take up space in your mind, long after they should have been evicted. They rent free in the rooms you need for something better. And the truest act of recovery is not the court case or the warrant or the moment the handcuffs click. It is the quieter decision to stop giving them the square footage. The clouds closed over Charleston. I opened my laptop. I had 3 new case files waiting. I got to work. If you have ever had to choose between protecting yourself and keeping the peace, you already know which one was right. Subscribe. You are not alone here.